Well, welcome again. According to my cell phone, it's 12:02, so let's begin. First of all, let me welcome you to the Ohio River Discussion Series. We appreciate that you joined this discussion. The Ohio River Discussion Series is an opportunity for communities and people to share their knowledge and passion for the Ohio River. And this monthly series was created by the Ohio River Recreational Trail last year. And in this year, this series was expanded with additional partners to provide additional support and content. The partners of this series include, of course, the Ohio River Recreational Trail, the Ohio River Basin Alliance, the Foundation for Ohio River Education, or SANCO, and the National Park Service. Now, my name is Lisa Cochran, and I'm the Communication Coordinator for SANCO. And my role today is facilitator of our discussion. I will move through the agenda by introducing the speakers, serving as a timekeeper, and facilitating the question and answer session. So hopefully everybody can see the slide, my screen. Moving on. The first basic task, of course, is housekeeping. I would ask that everybody mute your microphone unless you are speaking. Also disable your camera unless you're presenting. Throughout this discussion, please send all questions and comments to the chat service. And please be aware that this discussion will be recorded and published later. Now, we are using the format called GoToMeeting, and you may or may not be familiar with this format. It's generally very similar to the other formats, although not quite as popular. So the one feature that I do want to point out is your ability to change your view is usually located at the top. Your options are view everyone, view who's talking, view active cameras, and hide everyone. So at this time, if you're willing, please chat your name and organization to introduce yourself to all the attendees. And remember, throughout this discussion, if you would like to share any content, any links to your organization, any links that you feel is relevant to the discussion, please use the chat feature for that information. All right, our next slide is the agenda, so hopefully everybody can see our agenda there. And our discussion today is titled Ohio River Navigation, Past, Present, and Future. We have 3 speakers with excellent content and a wealth of information, and all 3 speakers are either current or retired employees of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And the reason for their expertise in Ohio River navigation is that the Corps manages the locks and dams, which ensure navigation along the Ohio River. And the Ohio River is truly a highway of transportation. I confess I didn't fully understand the traffic and the value of the Ohio River as a transportation venue until I started working with SANCO. And so the Corps can provide a wealth of information about navigation, much beyond simply the locks and dams, but that's a relatable piece because we can see the locks and dams. So we'll move through our 3 speakers today, and I'm sure that our attendees will have questions, but we will handle all the questions after all 3 of our speakers. So with that background, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, John Cheek. Now I'm going to read a brief bio, and while I'm reading that bio, behind the scenes we'll allow him to share his screen. John Cheek is a technical manager for the Army Corps of Engineers. He has 40 years of experience in operation and maintenance of vessels, waterways, locks, and dams. Prior to joining the Corps, John served on active duty in the Coast Guard as a ship navigator. Thank you for that bio. John, are you able to share your screen with us? I believe so. And whenever you're ready, if you could activate your microphone and your camera.
Okay, Lisa, can you hear me and see the presentation?
I see the presentation. I see you.
All right, very good. Well, thank you all. It's a pleasure to join you today, and I'm going to give you just a few short minutes on the history of the navigation on the Ohio River. So the Corps has been operating and maintaining the Ohio River for nearly 200 years now. There were 4 phases of improvements of the Ohio River, all roughly about 50 years apart. There was an open channel phase that started initially. There was a canalization, we call it initial canalization, numbered locks that you may remember. Came off the river a little bit and did some flood control work. So some of the lakes around the area that you may be familiar with, Brookville, Caesars Creek, Taylorsville, and Louisville are some examples. And then a modernization era of that initial canalization occurred in the mid-50s and just got completed in 2018. So let's first talk a little bit about early navigation. It was hard. You know, at best, it was inconsistent, and at worst, it was impossible. So shown here by this photo of the steamboat Tornado, hard aground. It went hard aground on August 1st. And didn't get refloated until the week of Thanksgiving that year. So it nearly spent 120 days aground just waiting for it to rain so the Ohio River would come up and have sufficient depth where it could float. In the Corps' mission, there's been some events that lead to an action. So the events that got the Corps involved in the Ohio River, the event occurred in 1818. 19 and 20, where there were just extended periods of low water. And as Lisa mentioned, the rivers are highways. And back then they were really highways. So people moved on the river, merchandise moved on the river. And in those low water periods, none of that was happening. So there was devastating effects to the economy. So let's focus in on open channel work, which began in 1824 and ran roughly till 1874. So that action from event of the low water in the early 1800s. So 1824, beginning of a federal role, the Corps of Engineers was assigned to open up the rivers. President Monroe, in his message to Congress, gave superintendents of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers and assigned that to the Corps of Engineers. So the first act was clearing and dredging. And the drawing to the right is an example of a tool that was used to do that. It was designed by Captain Henry Miller Shreve, who was a very prominent individual in developing the Western rivers. So he developed this vessel. It's called a snag boat. So it's got a twin hull, a catamaran hull. And let me move my mouse a little bit here. So it has this V notch in it. So it's able to go into a tree and grab hold of it with chains and these masts here with chain falls so it could pull it and pull it out. It was very maneuverable. It had steam powered rather, had paddle wheels on the outboard side so it could twist very well. And it, for 50 years, just cleaned all the snags, sawyer, stumps, logs out of the river. Captain Shreve cleared an impressive raft of trees on the Red River in Louisiana, and Shreveport, Louisiana is named after him. And these vessels were called Uncle Sam's Tooth Pullers. So let's move on to canalization. Again, another 50-year period, 1879 to 1929. So the Corps studied other river systems throughout the world, and one in particular in France. So they had dams that they called movable dams. So these dams rested on the bottom of the river, and when there was insufficient water, they would be physically raised, and that would deepen the water in each pool, as we're familiar with now. But when there was sufficient water, there wasn't any reason to have a dam, so they would be lowered and the vessels would pass over them. And I'm going to show you some pictures of those. The initial plan in the early 1800s was for 68 dams on the Ohio River. The final plan was for 54 dams. So in that period, that roughly 50-year period, the Corps constructed 51 dams, and which provided a 9-foot channel depth. Each dam had a standard 600-foot long chamber that was 110 feet wide. So here's what the locks look like, a drawing of where the locks were on the Ohio River. This picture was taken from a book I found, dated, it was published in 1934. So just to get you acclimated with my mouse, Pittsburgh up here, and then we follow the Ohio River down, the numbered locks sequentially get greater as you move downstream, and all the way down here past Paducah to Cairo, Illinois, with Ohio's confluence with the Mississippi. So I mentioned there were 54 in design, but we only built 51. So there was no 54. There was no 54. And for our folks in Louisville, 41 was at Louisville. There was no 40 above Louisville and no 42 below. And you can tell up here, we've already got a little bit of improvements with Emsworth and Dash Shields lock being built that took the place of locks 1, 2, and 3 on the Ohio River. So here's what those dams look like. They're called wicket dams. Each from here on my mouse to this block here is roughly 4 feet. They range from 12 to 20 feet in length, and they're in the upright position here during construction. So these wickets would be raised during periods of low water, and that would hold the water back and impound the pool to literally float your boat. When the water was too high, they would be lowered. This prop would be raised, and this is a steel rod here called a prop, and it would be lowered down. It would follow this track here, and they would lay down on the bottom of the river, and vessels would just pass over top. And there's how you raised them. You took a group of stout-hearted individuals. You got on this steam-powered boat, which was called a maneuver boat. And this rod here, this person on the end, physically hooks the rod to this wicket, and they hook it to a crane, and it gets raised, and then the wicket itself gets rotated up, and then it locks into place, and the vessel rides along the dam, and they move out, in this case, 4 feet, they're 4 feet wide, 4 feet at a time, hook the next one, raise it up, hook the next one, raise it up, and continue on. And then when it's time to lower it, they'll just do in the opposite. They'll grab the wicket. That prop will clear its stop, and it'll lower back down into the river. Lock 52 had 487 wickets to be raised and lowered. So here's a photo of Lock and Dam 1 on its opening day in 1885. So it was up near Pittsburgh. One thing you may notice that's a little unique here is it does not have a miter gate where the two leaves come together. It has a roller gate, so it is just a gate that rolls in and out, and when it's opened to allow the vessel to pass into the lock, it'll be rolled into this recess. So here's Lock and Dam 50, taken in 1980. So the lock chamber that we talked about is here. We see a toe moving through. The wicket dam here in this case is in the raised position, so there's not enough water. So we've raised the whole dam. This portion is called a wicket dam. There's another feature that's a little different called a bear trap dam, and it raises almost 100 feet of dam up and down. And then there's a fixed weir from the end of the bear trap dam that goes to the opposite bank of the lock to form this total dam. Again, the lock chambers, 110 feet wide, 600 feet long. And you kind of see a little foreshadowing of why these locks needed to be replaced, because the barges that we put together are too long to lock through a 600-foot chamber, and they need to lock through twice. Here's a photo of a lock that's got, we've got plenty of water, so we're passing, the dam is down, so you can't see it, and the vessel would simply pass through this navigation portion of the dam. You can see the bear traps here down as well, and then the fixed weir. I just want to briefly touch on flood control. That occurred, the event that caused this action, 1937 flood, so 1938 to 88. I just want to show you this map of the core lakes in the Ohio River Valley. The gray portion here is the drainage basin that the Corps has no control of on the water. So any rain that falls in the Ohio River Basin that lands in this gray area will go immediately to the river. The river will obviously rise, and what the Corps will do in our lakes, so like Taylorsville, Caesar Creek, Brookville Lakes, and some of West Sider, we will hold that water, and as soon as the water rises from that crest rather from the water we can't control, we'll start backfilling that water to reduce the total height of the water in the river if there were no lakes. So let's talk about the modernization era, which started in 1955 and ended just in 2018. So you're probably familiar with this schematic. So here's the locks that you probably recognize. So here in Cincinnati, Markland is below us, so it forms the pool to up to Meldal. So this map shows Markland. So the numbered locks that replaced were from 39 to 36. So all the name locks rather replaced 2 to 5 numbered locks. The Ohio formed up here in Pittsburgh and terminates with the confluence in Cairo. So here's an example of a typical Ohio River lock, and this one happens to be Markland. There's 2 chambers on the modernization era. We still have that 600-foot long chamber with 110 feet wide, but this in case we have a 1,200-foot long chamber where the toes can fit in. So they don't have to separate to go through. Instead of the wicket dam, there's a gated dam here that operates by push button. And in this case, in Markland's case, it has a hydroelectric power plant that's non-Corps owned. Some of them do have hydroelectric power plants, and some don't. So I think we've all seen this before. Just why is it so important to have navigation on the Ohio River? It is that massive amounts of quantities of bulk materials can be moved efficiently. So let's just take a look at one barge, and I'm going to show you what a barge looks like here and what a standard tow looks like. One barge, I'm not really good on hopper car equivalences, so I just run over here to truck. So one barge, let's say it's carrying gravel, would take 70 trucks to hold that same amount. One tow, which is when you take a bunch of barges together and you lash them together and put a boat on them, they become a tow, a TOW. The standard dimension in the Ohio River system is, our standard number is 15. So it would take 1,050 trucks to move that same amount of material than one tow can. So 8 or 9 people operating a towboat or 1,050 truck drivers operating trucks. So let's take a look at what the tow looks like. Here's a coal tow at Newburgh Lock and Dam. So there's 3 barges here. You can kind of see this white line. There's one in the center, one off on either side. So this is a jumbo barge. So it is 35 feet wide. So we have 1, 2, 3. So we have 35, 70, 105 feet in width and 110-foot chamber. The barges are 195 feet long, and you have to trust me on this one, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So they're 1,000 feet long, nearly 1,000 feet long. So the barges are all lashed together. Their overall dimension is almost 1,000 feet long and 105 feet wide. And you can see this little white rectangle in the back, and that's the towboat pushing it out. Let me show you what that looks like. So the towboat's on the stern of barges, so it pushes them around, and instead of pulling them like you would with a tugboat. So that concludes my talk today. I do a long play version of this that takes me about an hour to get through, so I have a lot more detailed on it, and I'd be happy to share that with anybody or any group. You can contact me on the information there, and I know you'll have a copy of these slides that you can get a hold of me. So thank you very much for your time today. I certainly appreciate it. And Lisa, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, John. That was a quick and informative presentation. And it really is fascinating. Those barges, the staff members at Orsenco have shared little helpful hints and clues to look for as you see those barges going by. You know, when is it full? When is it empty? So when you look at those more carefully, it really is fascinating to know what is going up and down the Ohio River. So yes, I agree. And I know other people will have questions and comments. We'll save all the questions for after all of the presentations. And our next speaker is Bob Willis. Now, I know Bob is sharing a computer with John, so we don't need to switch presenters, but if you'll allow me just to read a brief bio. Bob Willis is retired from the Army Corps of Engineers. He retired in 2010 with 40 years of experience in operation and maintenance of inland river and flood control systems. Bob served on active duty in the Army as a ship's maintenance officer. Now, since retirement, Bob is now a partner at NavSol Navigation Solutions, a consulting company specializing in engineering, design, operation, and maintenance of navigational structures on inland and coastal waterways. So he's still very busy despite being retired. Bob, thank you so much for your time. And I see your presentation. I see you. Can I hear you?
Can you?
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Ready to go?
Yes, please.
Okay. John is a tough act to follow, but I'll see what I can do here. First, welcome all you river rats, and I say that as an endearing term. World-class inland waterways, the title of an essay that I wrote for the book Full Steam Ahead. That was published back in 2011. My presentation today will be taken in part from this essay and in part from just reflections over my career with the Corps, which the majority of time was spent on the Ohio River. So, yeah, just a quick now synopsis on Full Steam Ahead. I believe, according to Heather, a very diverse audience, and I'm just going to go through the list of essays, and you'll be amazed at, like I say, the diversity. This book, you know, was put together to commemorate the 200 years since the first steamboat went down the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. Okay, the essays, and I'm hoping you'll find something that interests you here. The Harbinger Revolution is the first essay. It's a essay about the impacts of this first trip with a steamboat. Essay number 2, Structural Evolution of the Western River Steamboat. 3, A Synoptic History of Towboating and Its Origins. 4, The Era of Town Building Below the Falls. 5, Omen of Evil, Steamboats and the Colonization of the Ohio River Valley. Number 6, The Steamboat and Black Urban Life in the Ohio Valley. 7, Steamboat Music. This is an amazing chapter. Number 8, The Steamboat New Orleans and Its Impact on Navigation on Ohio River Tributaries, another really good one. And number 9, The Ohio River World-Class Inland Waterway. Okay, what we see here is what the Ohio River looked like before canalization. Obviously, at low levels, there wasn't much you could do. And it's this kind of river that Nicholas Roosevelt took the steamboat New Orleans down starting in Pittsburgh on 20 October 1811, arriving in New Orleans on January 10th, 1812. I'm going to read a piece from Full Steam Ahead, and it will give you some idea of what occurred during this famous trip. So I'm reading from the text here. Who would have thought a steamboat trip could spark a revolution? Yet the epic voyage of the New Orleans, first steamboat to descend the Ohio and Mississippi rivers to New Orleans, changed American civilization as well as the lives of its passengers and crew. Departing Pittsburgh, 20 October 1811, this new kind of boat received gala welcomes at nearly every port, and its passage was marked by the great comet of 1811 streaking across the sky, and by the greatest earthquake ever recorded in the continental United States. America was never the same after the first inland river steamboat chugged its way to glory. This first steamboat on western waters, harbinger of the Industrial Revolution that changed America. Interesting, when Roosevelt was waiting to get through the falls of the Ohio, he had time to take people upbound to Cincinnati. He made a trip upbound, which doesn't seem like much today, but people lined the riverbank to see this trip, and to people of that era, seeing something effortlessly go upstream at over 3 miles an hour was simply miraculous. This next slide, I'm jumping ahead. As John covered in his presentation, canalization of the Ohio was completed by 1929. If you look at this representation of sinkings, I've always found this to be amazing once I realized what was going on. I think most people, of course, are aware of World War II and the United States part in it, but they don't realize that at the beginning of the war, we lost this much in the way of people and ships. And you can see the 311 ships hit in this area, 255 sunk. Most of this happened in the first 6 months to a year of the war. German U-boats, on occasion, would run out of torpedoes, and they would surface and sink ships with the deck gun. So anyway, this is interesting. And I'm going to get back to this and make a couple more points here. So two things that you can look at relative to the Ohio River during this period of time that it's just amazing. The first one is that the Ohio River offered a parallel course that was protected up the Ohio River. And second, there was tremendous amount of shipbuilding on the Ohio River and its tributaries. I need to read from another article, which was part of my essay here, because I have too many facts and figures to remember. But here we go. If there was any doubt about the importance of the Ohio River to the nation, or justification for the investment made for canalization, World War II vindicated all of those people who worked so hard to make the project a reality. The building of military vessels at inland shipyards along the Ohio River and its tributaries offered a key supplement to shipbuilding by the larger coastal yards. Of the 1,058 landing ship tanks, LSTs, built during the war, 724 came from inland river ports. The number of military craft built on the Ohio and its tributaries during the war added up to more than 1,000 submarine chasers, mine layers, tugboats, destroyer escorts, LSTs, and naval dry docks. A typical example of those inland shipyards is the Evansville shipyard, which was the largest producer of LSTs in the nation. And that's what we're looking at here. The Ohio could not have served the country in so strategically important way without the canalization project. Today, LST 325, which is more just upriver of Evansville waterfront, serves as a museum and is listed on the National Register of Historical Places. Typical of the LSTs built on the inland waters, the vessel, approximately 340 feet by 55 feet, had a displacement or weight of approximately 5,000 tons when fully loaded. Raw material and commodities supporting the war effort were shipped on the Ohio, and the river allowed for a protected route for petroleum products to reach the East Coast ports. Although forgotten today by most Americans, German submarines were devastating American shipping off the Atlantic and Gulf Coast in the early years of World War II. The sinking of oil tankers caused a shortage of 175,000 barrels of oil a day. The Mississippi and Ohio, along with the intercoastal waterways, solved the problem by providing a protected waterway to move this vital commodity. Okay, what we see here is a view of the Panama Canal, and it shows one of the new, the new locks, which were finished in 2016. I wanted to put this one up. We can talk about it in a minute briefly, but what I wanted to talk about mainly about the Panama Canal was our relationship with them before and after the turnover in 1999 to the Panamanian government. I personally had close relationships with many of the Panamanians, and what's interesting is their typical chamber in the old Panama Canal, which is still in use, was footprint for the lock chamber was 1,000 feet by 110 foot wide. And as John pointed out, a main chamber on the Ohio River is 1,200 by 110. Very similar footprint, different drafts, but we shared a lot of the same maintenance problems, similar gates, similar filling and emptying systems. So, we had a very close relationship with them. And I can tell you that during that time, I was familiar with the benefits, of course, that the Ohio River produced. And although calculated differently, what the Panamanian benefits were. Different calculations, but order of magnitude very similar. So you're looking at the impounded Ohio River producing benefits very similar to the Panama Canal in the late 80s, early 90s. Of course, now just a short look at the lock chambers here. Each lockage can handle almost 3 times the tonnage of the old ones. And as you can see, John pointed out that there were roller gates early on in the first canalization of the river. These are also roller gates, very large, and you see them in sets of 2 so that when they want to do maintenance, they can continue to operate. They simply roll the gate back in where the recess, which you can see, work on it there, and then the other gate is used to continue operations. The other unique thing about the new locks is you see those ponds of water off to your right. Those are water saving. It's a water saving system, and kind of complicated. Not enough time to go into it here, but it saves water. They have a different setup. All the water comes from Lake Gatun at the highest elevation. Okay, we're going to have to speed up a little bit here. What we see here is the Grand Canal. This has always amazed me when people talk about China. Everybody knows about the Great Wall of China, but no one knows about the Grand Canal. Grand Canal was started in roughly 400 BC, and it was finished in 650 AD. Today, you can see the modern, the picture of what it looks like today. It's not, it's in pieces, you might say. The longest operating piece is only about 400 miles. The original canal connected Beijing with Hangzhou, and it was 1,100 miles long. And like I say, completed in 650 AD. And by the way, they also invented the first pound lock, which is it's what a modern lock does today. There's nothing political about what China's in the news all the time, but this has always been an amazing thing to me that was finished. Okay, next, John. Okay, John's given me permission to talk about something that I can overdo. It's sustainability of the system, and I'm going to have to go quickly here to meet my time. But just know the Corps of Engineers has tremendous personnel and a funding system that's very difficult to work with infrastructure that you need to stay 10 years ahead of on planning for. We have a 1-year cycle on the funding, basically. So that finishes my presentation, and enjoyed very much talking to a group of river rats.
Bob, that was excellent. And John did a fabulous job keeping you on time. That was perfect timing.
Well, John told me that I was going to be in trouble if I didn't, let me tell you.
Very good. Well, Bob,
you.
that was very interesting. I like the fact that the title of the essay was The World-Class Inland Waterway, and then you provided some excellent visuals that illustrated that. I did not know about the Grand Canal in China in the comparison to the Panama Canal. That was really fascinating, so I appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm sure, once again, other people, our attendees, have questions and comments as well. We have one more speaker, and then we'll open it up to a discussion. Our next speaker, I am pleased to introduce, is P.J. Donovan. He is the Chief of Pixin Red. And give me just a moment. I'm getting the thumbs up from PJ. I did it right. The Pixin Red stands for the Planning Center of Expertise for Inland Navigation and Risk-Informed Economics Division. And that's obviously a long organization, but I think that's exceptional. I mean, it describes it so well, and what a wealth of information you must provide for the Corps. I see a presentation on my screen, but let me very briefly read just a sentence of a bio for Mr. Donovan. Mr. Donovan, as the Chief of Pixin Red, is the technical point of contact for the Corps as it pertains to programmatic assignments related to inland navigation, and assists in the formation of the Corps' inland navigation program policies, procedures, and business practices. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's a good introduction. PJ, I see you, and I think I can hear you as well.
Oh, I believe I'm up. Good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful introduction. Thank you very much, Lisa. Let me slip in one thing. I am also a veteran as well, 8 years active duty Army. So we all tend to come together, don't we? So great. It's always exciting to talk the Ohio River Valley, the Ohio River Valley system. So let's jump right into this. Let's see if we got some things we want to talk about real quick. Next slide, please. So, what's rolling on the river today is really where we're going to go here in a minute. But I have a fantastic staff full of data scientists, and I gave them a task, and I was like, hey, come up with some fun facts about the Ohio River system I can lead with. I think they're a little out of order here, so I'm just going to let you know I am coming to you from Huntington, West Virginia, home of Marshall University, and of course, home of the 2020 NCAA national champion in men's soccer. So let's hear it for the Herd. So we got that done this year. with that, you know, when you think the Ohio River Valley and you see, if you're a river rat, you hang out on the river or you're driving along, you drive over it, you see the coal barges, right? We know coal is king out there, right? When it comes to tonnage. But also there's something else going out there. We're also the Ohio River system is also the highest when it comes to tonnage for limestone, sand, and quicklime than any other waterway in the United States. Going back to our wonderful history lesson we just got, think about it. We still have a lock and dam in operation today that opened in 1921. That's Emsworth. So, you know, these engineers that are part of the Army Corps of Engineers, they can build things that last. Let me tell you, 100 years we've been running Emsworth up in the Pittsburgh pool. As we heard today earlier, also Olmsted came online in 2018. So about 100 years of technology out there in this river system, ensuring that our nation's commerce can continue to move. Something that I found interesting, the widest point of the Ohio is 1 mile wide, and it's at the Smithland Dam. And that's at river mile 918.5 south of Pittsburgh. So it's down there in that place called Brookport, Illinois. So we go pretty far down, 1 mile wide. So some cool stuff there. Another thing, and I'm going to show this here on a map real quick, is there's about 25 million people that live in this Ohio River basin, this place we call home currently today. So there's a lot of stuff happening. And then, of course, you know, there's about 164 species of fish and over 100 species of mussels that live in our waterway. That include a number of threatened and endangered species, which drives a lot of the recreational activities we see out there today. So this river is important to us as a region and as a nation. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do today for today's discussion is, you know, I've always been fascinated about what's rolling on the river. What are those top commodities? What are they by tonnage, which is a very important metric for the Corps, but also what is it by value to the nation? What does that value mean to the system as we look at it? So one of the things I asked my data scientists to do was go ahead and kind of break this Ohio River into two pieces, because I believe that there are two distinct segments to the Ohio River. There's an upper segment that we kind of designated from the Canal River, from Canova, West Virginia, which is the mouth of the Big Sandy, up to Pittsburgh. And that's a very heavily industrialized part of the river system. And then we want to look at that lower segment that from the mouth of the Big Sandy River south, right, to Ohio River to Cairo, Illinois. And I think what I'm trying to do here, and hopefully my slides will show this, is we start seeing a different commodity mix as we move south, right? So there's this system is very dynamic in what it moves out there. Very surprising, some numbers I hope to hit you with here in a minute. So next slide. So just kind of give you that geographical layout of what I was just talking about. You know, you got Pittsburgh to the north, right? Then you come down and you see the break point right here, Wayne National Forest. That's Huntington, West Virginia. That's where I'm sitting today. You roll down, you see Cincy, Louisville, Evansville, all the way down, right? You see some pretty big metropolitan areas on this river system. So that's the geography. Kind of that light blue going north. That's that upper segment, and then I think that's almost a Kentucky blue to my friends in Kentucky, heading down in that southern segment. So that's kind of the geography I'm talking about today. Next slide, please. So here we go. Let's get in let's crush some numbers here. So top commodities by tonnage. We just basically pulled out 10 commodities. We looked at that upper segment of the Ohio River, and then we're looking at that lower segment, uppers to the left, lowers to the right on your screen. So as not surprising, when you look at sheer tonnage, coal is the dominant commodity that we continue to move on the system today. And these numbers are reflective of the 2019 Waterborne Commerce Statistics Center data. So this is pretty current data we're looking at. Aggregates, that's a catch-all. Aggregates catches a lot of product that moves out there. Continuing to see some interesting things. But as we move down to line number 3 and line number 4 on the top commodities, when you look at that upper segment and you look at that lower segment, you start seeing a change here, right? We start seeing grains introduced on that lower segment, and we start seeing petroleum introduced on that upper segment, right? We start seeing some dynamic shifts in the commodities that are moving. And keep those products, those commodities in your mind, because as we work down the list and you see, looking at the pie charts, you start seeing what's coming out at you. When we move to the next slide, when we talk about value, what are the value of these commodities moving, I think you're going to see something interesting. So if we can jump slides there, please. Next slide. So let's look at these top commodities by value that are moving on the system today, right? Once again, 2019 data. Where do we get our values? Well, our values are estimated from North Dakota State University from 2019, and it's a commodity validation study that we here in the center we engage in every couple of years to ensure we got updated commodity pricing to do this analysis by value. And keep in mind, this value is in millions, so that is billions that you're seeing on the screen. So that petroleum number, when you look at value, that petroleum number jumps off the screen at you for the upper Ohio. That is the value of the petroleum moving from basically the mouth of the Big Sandy River all the way up to Pittsburgh. That's $4 billion. And then you look at coal, right? And then you come down and you see crude, petroleum, and then steel, right? Those are the big commodities. Steel, see chemical holding in there. Go to that lower segment and you see pretty much the mix. But once again, there's about $3 billion worth of grains moving south on the river segment. And if you understand the geography and you know the regions, this makes sense. This makes sense, right? Because that southern stretch of the Ohio River is very much tied to the agricultural heartland of America. So not only are we providing petroleum for over 25 million Americans, we're also feeding a lot of people with the commodities we see moving on this system today. So we've got a very dynamic commodity mix, right? We're providing petroleum, or we're providing chemicals, we're feeding people, we've got the raw inputs. That aggregate is that raw input, that stone, sand, that's the stuff that's going into those I-64 corridor, I-70 corridor construction projects you see out there today. The majority of that stone you see coming in is aggregate coming in by barge. It's coming in by barge. So some really cool things happening out there that are related to our waterways. If we want to jump to the next slide, if we could. So this is a model we have here in the center. This is our Waterborne Commerce Statistical Analyzer. This is a GIS-based model. And what we did here is, there's this little thing in the news about supply chain disruption and petroleum, and maybe some panic buying was going on, just a couple weeks ago. I know our memories tend to be short sometimes with these issues. They come at us so fast today. So I kind of introduced this idea of petroleum and petroleum on the Ohio River system. And what you're seeing here is a heat map. It's a density map. And also what you're seeing is origin and destination of petroleum moves in and out of our region, in and out of our basin. So that orange dot you see on the screen right there is the mouth of the Big Sandy River. That's where we broke it again. So if you kind of look at it, if you look at my slide, you see the same numbers of values, but you start seeing where this petroleum's moving to, and where's it going. We got states like West Virginia shipping a lot of petroleum by value, Kentucky and Ohio, right, and then Indiana. And then you come down, where's this going? Well, some of it's going to Kentucky, some of it's going to Louisiana and Tennessee and Ohio. Pennsylvania receives a lot of petroleum as well. A lot of it stays here in West Virginia. So you see Texas actually getting some of our petroleum shipping states to us. So this backbone here, this is the heartland of America. This isn't our industrial might. This is our agricultural might. And the Ohio River Valley provides all those commodities that we talked about today to ensure that we have a dynamic economy. And we talked a little bit about sustainability in previous discussions. So John, it would have been good to have a little bit more conversation on that, I think, today about sustainability and what it means to our system. But that's what we have today. I think we're going to jump to some questions. Hopefully I left enough time for questions. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa, and let's see what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you, PJ. This was one of the...
You're welcome.
This was exceptionally easy. My job was so easy. Everybody stayed on time. It was fabulous. I appreciate that. I think these three speakers provide an excellent, very high-level summary of the value of the Ohio River. And that complements one of the overall goals of this whole Ohio River discussion series, is understanding the value of the Ohio River and sharing our passion for the Ohio River. And these three speakers demonstrated how exceptionally valuable the Ohio River is as a highway. And of course, I'm oversimplifying it when I say a highway, I think these presentations did an excellent job. So I do appreciate everybody's time. And we have just enough time for a few questions. So I would request that all of the speakers turn on your camera and turn on your microphones. And oh, very good. I see everybody. And once again, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And I see one question, and I'll open this to all three speakers. Who owns, so to speak, the power generated at Markland?
You know, it was CG&E, and then they went through some mergers. It's the last IPSI when they went through those mergers or 20 or 25 years ago, but it's not the core. So it'd be a non-federal interest on all the hydropower on the Ohio River. I don't know exactly who, but it's not the core.
Very good. And forgive me, there was a word that you used. It's a non-something interest. I didn't.
Not non-federal, so it's not a
Non-federal.
federal hydropower.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Anything else to add to that?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
All right. And selfishly, I want to ask a question that I submitted. I did not realize how old the technology was for the wicket dams, that was something that we was already in use in France, and then we applied that in the United States in the early 1800s or mid, if I'm remembering correctly. Are there any wicket dams that are still in use in the United States?
Yeah, ironically, the one that we put on service in 2018 at Olmsted uses a wicket dam.
Yes.
The wickets there are much larger. They're 10 feet wide and about 30 feet tall, but they're made of steel. So that's a wicket dam. So that one wicket dam replaced two wicket dams. And there's two on the Illinois waterway at Peoria and LaGrange that are still the old 4 feet with wooden wickets that operate there. So of the Corps' 191 lock sites, 3 of them are wicket dams.
That's wild. Absolutely. Another question. Are there plans in motion to replace some of the older dams on the Ohio River?
Yeah, Lisa, I could take that one for you. Here in the center, we just recently completed an economic update of the upper Pittsburgh, upper Ohio River, Elmsworth, Ashworth, and I just went brain dead on the third one. Sorry about that. But yes, they passed the BCR mustard, and they're moving into Congress and looking for funding. So yes, Elmsworth, that dates back to 1921, will be getting a new chamber. So we were able to get that done. So funding should be coming.
Excellent.
That's
Very good.
Sorry. Yes. So I see there's another question, but Lisa, I want you tweak something in my brain, and this is where we get scary for the group. So we talked about it as a highway. So the U.S. Department of Transportation, Maritime Administration has actually designated inland waterways as marine highways. This was a process that probably started about 10 years ago. So the Ohio River, all the way through the Missouri River, is designated as the M70 Marine Highway by the U.S. Department of Transportation. So it is a marine highway, M70.
M70, I like that. Excellent.
M70.
Very good. Let's see, I see a couple more questions. How long did it take to raise and lower each wicket on the wicket dams?
Well, several minutes to never. So it all depended on the condition. Typically, when the wickets were put down, let's say in November, when we typically had enough rain to sustain the water in the river, the first raising, if you will, in the springtime or summertime rather, would take. And I'm going by 52 and 53 because those are the last two we operated and the ones I'm most experienced in. It could take 24, 36 hours of continuous work to raise them all. And that's because they had silt on them. And then once we started raising them up and down, raising's takes a longer, it could be several minutes. And if everything's working properly, To lower them, I've seen them go lower one every 6 seconds. They'll just go along and you just click it and it falls and falls and falls and falls. So it really depends on how long they've been in and what condition they're in.
Right.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I have to imagine that would have been impressive to see the 6 second, pop, pop, pop.
Yeah.
More questions are rolling in. What areas do you see increasing use of river navigation within the Ohio River Basin?
All right, let me swing. I'll swing for the fence on this. First, let me put a plug in here, Harry. I'm actually pitching again tomorrow with the Appalachian Regional Commission out of Washington, D.C. They have renewed interest in a strategic plan for the Ohio River Basin and what does river transportation or inland navigation mean to the economy for the region, the 13-state region. So that's getting ready to go down tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting news that we've got some interest from external agencies looking at this as well. I think the growth area continues to be in the petroleum sectors. I think we've kind of looked at coal-fired power plants. They're kind of at the end of their life cycle here. I don't want to get into political discussions, but they're at the end of their life cycles. Most of them are 50 to 60 years old. So they're looking at, updating them, or they're moving to a different fuel alternative. So coal is pretty much, I think we're at where we're going to stay with coal on the system. So as we look at this, if I take my Army Corps of Engineers hat off and put on, my big thinking hat, I think we really have to look at that 21st century supply chain and what does containerization on the river system look like? What does it mean to move commodities by containers via the inland navigation system? And that's a whole nother series of conversations we can have, which is totally fascinating. But there's opportunity, and so that's where I'm going to park for now.
Very nice. John, Bob, anything to add?
No, I mean, reference to a comment just made, and this going back 10 years ago when I did that essay, but I was in contact with the Europeans, and John and I were just talking about that, but their main concern was getting vehicular traffic off their highways, relative to the inland waterway system. And they're also very aware of, less pollution, that type of thing, but a little different than ours. But it's hard not to mention when you see all the chemicals that go up the Tennessee River, the amount of toxic chemicals, liquefied chemicals that move on the rivers and stay out of, trucks or trains that typically would go down through cities and things like that. It represents something that's important, and I say the Europeans were very keyed into that. So we're at a different place than they are, though, quite frankly, because our inland river system is a whole lot better. I mean, it's hard to make comparisons even. So, yeah.
Excellent. Good point. Very good. Yeah, it's we got to look at it globally. Yeah. So I appreciate that reminder. We have one more question that we can get to before 1 o'clock. Well, I've got 1 o'clock on the dot. So if you need to leave, of course, feel free to leave. But I do think we have time with our presenters for just one more question. Are more flood controlled lakes being installed within the basin?
This is John. I'm not aware of any, or any plans to add any more lakes.
Excellent. Well, with that, I appreciate that answer. It is 101. So I know we all have a lot to do and a lot of commitments, but I do want to remind all the attendees that you will receive a follow-up email from ORBA with the contact information for all of our presenters. They have graciously allowed us to contact them if we have any follow-up questions or contacts that we'd like to make. So look for that email. And I'm going to ask if Heather Mayfield is willing to very briefly talk about June's Ohio River discussion series. And I'm surprising Heather with this because I was supposed to include a slide, which I forgot. So Heather, are you able to very briefly promote the June?
Yeah, can everybody see my screen?
I can, and I can hear you, yes.
Okay, excellent. So given the fact that we are on the cusp of a contact recreation season on the Ohio River, we thought it would be really beneficial and really timely at this point to feature a presentation with some experts on harmful algal blooms on the river. As you guys know, we had in 2019 a pretty significant harmful algal bloom, and then in 2015, just 4 years prior, we had one of the largest harmful algal blooms ever recorded on the Ohio River that spanned almost 700 miles. So it affected everything from boating to swimming. There was an Ironman triathlon that was canceled. It caused some of our water treatment systems along the length of the Ohio River to incur some pretty significant cost in order to make the water safe to drink and safe to distribute. So join us on June 29th. We'll have 3 experts. I'm really excited about this topic, actually. We'll have Roger Tucker, who is a scientist with Louisville Water District, and he's going to talk about what the water districts do on the Ohio River to monitor and treat harmful algal blooms and some of the toxins that they may produce in our water system. We'll also have Ruth Bryland. She's the state HABs coordinator for the state of Ohio, and she will kind of be the guru to give us all the information on what we need to know in terms of, what harmful algal blooms, how they can be harmful in terms of recreation and in terms of using the river. And then we'll also have Chris Nietzsche. He's a research scientist with US EPA, and he's actually worked with Orsenko. I've been lucky enough to work a little bit on this project as well, to develop an early warning system for harmful algal blooms based on flow in the Ohio River. So hope you guys can join us next month, Tuesday, June 29th at 12 noon.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Heather, for filling in that information. My apologies for forgetting that slide.
No worries.
We were very lucky to have this content. It was a wealth of information. I want to thank all the presenters and all the attendees. We appreciate it. And remember, you will receive a follow-up email from Orba. Thank you so much.